Block 1. The Man Who Sowed the Seeds of Tomorrow. Hello and welcome. Today, we embark on a journey through one of science's most profound tragedies and triumphs. The story of Nikolai Vavilov, a visionary who held the key to eradicating famine only to be crushed by the very regime he sought to serve. This is a tale of courage against ideology, seeds of hope in the shadow of tyranny, and a legacy that continues to nourish humanity decades after his cruel death. By the end of this video, you'll understand how this unsung hero's quest to feed millions collided with Stalin's brutal suppression of truth, and why his scientific resurrection still shapes our battle against hunger today. Picture a man driven by an almost sacred mission: to hunt the globe for plant diversity that could armor humanity against starvation. Nikolai Vavilov, agronomist, botanist, geneticist, wasn't just a scientist. He was an Indiana Jones of agriculture. Between 1916 and 1940, he embarked on 115 expeditions across 64 countries, from Afghanistan's mountains to Ethiopia's highlands. Braving bandits, disease, and treacherous terrain, he amassed over 250,000 seeds, roots, and fruits. His motto, "Life is short, we must hurry," pulsated through every journey. He wasn't collecting specimens for a museum, he was building an ark. His crowning achievement? Identifying Earth's centers of origin, the ancient birthplaces of cultivated crops, revealing where genetic gold mines for drought or disease resistance lay hidden. This revolutionary theory remains agriculture's bedrock today. In Leningrad, Vavilov founded the world's first comprehensive seed bank, a fortress of biodiversity now known as the Vavilov Institute. Imagine rooms stacked with seeds of every wheat, potato, and apple variety imaginable, a living library against apocalypse. But Vavilov's genius threatened a different apocalypse: the collapse of Soviet pseudoscience. Enter Trofim Lysenko, a charlatan agronomist who mesmerized Stalin with fantastical promises. Lysenkoism rejected Mendelian genetics, claiming crops could train themselves, like winter wheat magically transforming into spring wheat through sheer force of will. Vavilov, with fierce integrity, exposed this as dangerous nonsense. He warned it would starve millions. For this defiance, the state branded him an enemy. The tragedy unfolded with cruel irony. In 1940, as Vavilov collected seeds in war-torn Ukraine to bolster food security, Stalin's agents arrested him as a British spy. Interrogated 400 times over months in a freezing cell, he refused to confess to fabricated crimes. Sentenced to death, he withered to a skeleton in Saratov prison. In January 1943, amid a world war fueled by scarcity, Vavilov died of starvation. The man who dedicated his life to ending famine perished hungry, abandoned in a jail cell. Meanwhile, his seed bank faced its own calvary. During the siege of Leningrad, as citizens ate glue and sawdust, Vavilov's staff guarded potatoes and rice samples around the clock. 12 scientists chose starvation rather than consume a single seed. Their sacrifice preserved a heritage that still feeds us. Vavilov's ghost haunted Soviet agriculture. Lysenkoism triggered crop failures and famines, setting back science for decades. But from ashes, redemption grew. Rehabilitated in 1955, Vavilov is now a Russian hero. His institute safeguards 330,000 seed varieties, the blueprint for climate-resistant supercrops. When famine threatens Africa or floods ravage Asia, breeders dive into Vavilov's collection for solutions. His principles underpin global treaties shielding biodiversity, a shield against tomorrow's disasters. So, as we delve deeper, ask yourself, how many lives might his seeds have saved had tyranny not silenced him? And what warnings does his story hold for us today? Block 2. The Harvest of Tyranny, How Pseudoscience Starved a Nation. As the echo of Vavilov's final breath faded in that desolate Saratov cell, the very catastrophe he had predicted began to unfold across the Soviet Union with terrifying speed. Stalin's embrace of Trofim Lysenko's pseudoscience unleashed a cascade of agricultural ruin. Lysenkoism wasn't merely wrong, it was scientific arson, systematically torching decades of genetic research. Lysenko dismissed chromosomes as bourgeois fiction, insisting crops inherited acquired characteristics through sheer environmental willpower under socialist ideals. At Stalin's command, this dogma became law. Geneticists were purged, textbooks burned, and Vavilov's seed bank, a trove of meticulously cataloged biodiversity, was sidelined. In its place, Lysenko promoted disastrous practices, planting seeds impossibly close to cooperate like communist workers, or soaking wheat in ice water to magically transform winter varieties into spring crops. The results were catastrophic. Between 1946 and 1947, following Lysenko's mandates, Ukraine and southern Russia suffered a man-made famine that killed over 1 million people. Fields yielded rotten, stunted grains. Entire harvests failed as unadapted crops withered under frost or disease. Soviet agriculture entered a dark age, losing 30–50% of potential yields for decades. Lysenko, shielded by Stalin's paranoia, labeled any failure as wrecking by imaginary saboteurs, further tightening his grip. The cost? Not just starvation, but the deliberate blinding of a scientific superpower. While the West advanced hybrid corn and green revolution technologies, Soviet genetic research lay fallow, a direct consequence of Vavilov's silencing. Yet even in the bleakest winters, seeds endure. Vavilov's legacy persisted through the courage of his disciples. After Stalin's death in 1953, a slow thaw began. In 1955, Vavilov was officially rehabilitated, his name cleansed of treason charges. His institute, scarred but unbroken, resumed his mission. Scientists secretly preserved smuggled seed samples during Lysenko's reign, and now they meticulously cross-referenced Vavilov's field notes to revive his work. His centers of origin theory proved indispensable. When a virulent strain of wheat stem rust threatened global harvests in the 1960s, researchers turned to Vavilov's Ethiopian collections, finding resistant wild relatives that saved millions of tons of grain. Today, the Vavilov Institute's 330,000 specimens are a Noah's Ark for our climate crisis. Peruvian potato varieties from Vavilov's Andes expeditions now fortify European crops against blight. Drought-tolerant Ethiopian barley genes shield Australian farms from aridification. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, scientists raced to back up duplicate seeds in Norway's Svalbard Global Seed Vault, a facility directly inspired by Vavilov's vision. His theory underpins critical treaties like the International Plant Treaty, which governs global seed sharing. Every time breeders develop flood-resistant rice for Bangladesh or heat-tolerant maize for Kenya, they walk the path Vavilov carved through mountain passes and political minefields. Vavilov's story is a double helix of warning and hope. It screams against the mortal danger of subjugating science to ideology, whether in Stalin's show trials or modern climate denial. When evidence is sacrificed to dogma, fields starve and futures dim. Yet, his life also illuminates the indestructible power of curiosity and courage. Those seeds guarded by starving scientists in Leningrad still germinate solutions. A single wheat variety from his collection, rescued from near extinction, now underpins disease-resistant strains across 6 continents. So, as we face unprecedented threats to food security, from superbugs to soaring temperatures, Vavilov's arc reminds us biodiversity is not a luxury, but our lifeline. And defending the truth-tellers who safeguard it isn't just about honoring the past, it's about feeding the future. The genius who died for genetics left us more than seeds. He planted a manifesto. In the soil of free inquiry, humanity's survival takes root.
Block 3. The Seeds of Genius. How Vavilov's vision could have prevented tragedy. The sheer scale of the catastrophe inflicted by Lysenko and Stalin becomes unbearably clear when we confront the profound depth of the scientific vision they extinguished. Nikolai Vavilov wasn't simply collecting seeds. He was constructing a revolutionary blueprint for global food security, a living library of genetic potential assembled through an unparalleled scientific odyssey. Imagine a man driven by an almost obsessive conviction that the key to ending hunger lay not in dogma, but in the intricate diversity of plants themselves, scattered across the planet by millennia of human migration and adaptation. This conviction propelled Vavilov on expeditions spanning 5 continents and over 64 countries, from the wind-swept Altiplano of the Andes to the terraced highlands of Ethiopia, from the ancient fields of Afghanistan to the remote valleys of Central Asia. He wasn't just gathering specimens. He was meticulously documenting the centers of origin, the ancient heartlands where humanity first domesticated key crops like wheat, potatoes, rice, and maize. He identified 8 primary centers and 3 subsidiary ones, mapping the geographical cradle of agricultural biodiversity. This wasn't abstract theory. It was a practical map guiding the search for the raw genetic material needed to breed better crops. Vavilov understood that within these centers lay wild relatives and traditional land races possessing invaluable traits honed by natural selection. Drought tolerance forged in arid highlands, disease resistance evolved through millennia of pathogen pressure, cold hardiness perfected in mountain winters. His Leningrad seed bank, by the time of his arrest, held over 250,000 accessions, one of the largest and most diverse collections the world had ever seen. It was a genetic Noah's Ark, a safeguard against extinction and a reservoir for future innovation. He pioneered the concept of using this diversity for practical plant breeding, envisioning crops tailored to specific environments and resilient against known and unknown threats. Think of the sheer potential. Drought-resistant wheat varieties from Ethiopia's highlands saving harvests in parched regions. Potato varieties from the Andes naturally immune to the devastating blight that caused the Irish famine, bolstering food security worldwide. Rice land races from Southeast Asia offering salinity tolerance crucial for coastal agriculture threatened by rising seas. Vavilov wasn't just preserving the past. He was meticulously curating the building blocks of humanity's agricultural future. He established research stations across the vast Soviet Union to test and adapt these varieties, creating a network designed to turn genetic diversity into tangible solutions for farmers. His institute was the Silicon Valley of botany, attracting brilliant minds focused on applying rigorous science to feed people. The bitterest irony, the deepest tragedy, lies in the brutal juxtaposition. While Vavilov languished and died, his life's work locked away or actively suppressed, the very disasters his science sought to prevent were unfolding with horrific consequences. The famine that ravaged Ukraine and southern Russia in 1946-47 was not merely a consequence of Lysenko's pseudoscience. It was also a direct result of Vavilov's science being. His seed bank contained countless varieties adapted precisely to those regions. Winter wheats proven to withstand the specific cold snaps that destroyed Lysenko's vernalized crops. Drought-tolerant barleys that could have endured the dry spells. The genetic solutions to combat the pathogens that rotted the unsuitable crops in the fields existed, curated and cataloged in Leningrad, rendered useless by political decree. His network of research stations designed to deploy resilient varieties locally was dismantled or forced to implement Lysenko's doomed methods. The million lives lost weren't just victims of bad policy. They were casualties of the deliberate silencing of the one man whose science offered the clearest path to avoid such suffering. The wrecking Stalin and Lysenko blamed was, in reality, the catastrophic absence of Vavilov's foresight and the genetic treasures he had amassed. His potential to feed millions wasn't theoretical. It was tangible, locked in vaults guarded by ideology instead of science. This suppression reached a nadir of almost unbearable poignancy during the siege of Leningrad. As Nazi forces encircled the city in September 1941, cutting off all supply lines and subjecting its inhabitants to a horrific 900-day famine, Vavilov's colleagues at his institute faced an unimaginable moral crucible. Surrounded by hundreds of thousands of edible seeds, rice, peas, corn, wheat, they chose to starve rather than consume the irreplaceable genetic heritage they were sworn to protect. Several scientists, including the curator of the rice collection, Dmitry Ivanov, died at their desks, skeletal figures guarding sacks of grain that could have saved their lives. They understood, with a clarity forged in desperation, that Vavilov's collection was a lifeline for future generations far beyond Leningrad's walls. This act of supreme sacrifice underscores the profound value they placed on Vavilov's vision, a vision that recognized these seeds not merely food for today, but as the indispensable genetic code for feeding humanity through the uncertainties of tomorrow. The loss of Vavilov meant the loss of the architect who could interpret this code, the strategist who could deploy it against hunger. His genius was cut down just as it was poised to deliver its greatest harvest, leaving a void filled by pseudoscience and starvation.